too. Quentin Kidd with the Christopher Newport University Wason Center. What do you see in your most recent round of polling?
Some similarities or some consistencies in public opinion as it relates to attitudes toward Donald Trump, attitudes toward the direction of the country relative to the direction of Virginia. Virginians continue to be a little bit down on the direction of the nation relative to the direction of the Commonwealth. The direction of the Commonwealth leads the direction of the nation by about 25%, which is a good thing if you're a Virginia politician, public official, or you're the Virginia governor or something like that, because it means people are more happy with what's going on in the Commonwealth than they are in the rest of the country. People continue to be down on Donald Trump in Virginia. About a third of Virginia registered voters say they like what he's doing. About 2/3 say they don't like what he's doing. And I think those three data points, direction of the Commonwealth, direction of the country, and favorable, unfavorable of Donald Trump, I think are important because they set the larger landscape for elections in Virginia. They did last fall in the governor's race. They are going to this fall in the congressional U.S. Senate races. And so the landscape doesn't look good it doesn't look as good as you'd want it to if you're a Republican. And if you're a Republican who's trying to keep some distance from Donald Trump, probably a good thing, all things being equal, but a difficult thing because you're of the same party. And so that's the broader landscape in Virginia right now, which I think is important as a context.
I think it's an important one too, because we're also probably looking at a higher level of turnout in the 2018 senatorial race and congressional races than we saw in the gubernatorial race, right?
Yeah, I would guess by 15, maybe 20 points.
Really?
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, look, you could see we had turnout in the 45, 46.
Yeah, and that was high. That was a high turnout for a gubernatorial.
It was a high turnout, but we could see turnout 55, 60 in the fall General Assembly. In the fall U.S. Senate races. Probably not going to get to 65. I wouldn't think. I mean, that would be a huge turnout. But could you get to 55, close to 60? I think so. I mean, so maybe not 15 to 20, maybe 12 to 15%. We could see 12 to 50% increase over last fall's turnout.
Wow, that's pretty high. So it appears that the Trump factor, I called it the Trump suburban tsunami, with spelling tsunami and suburban with TS in the fall. I mean, that's what hit. That's where the swing vote is in Virginia. It appears urban and rural areas of the Commonwealth are pretty locked into their voting patterns, but the suburban areas are the ones that really, see it differently. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would call it swing votes anymore. I do think that suburban voters have historically been the swing voters in Virginia. Remember, in the 70s and 80s, it was suburban voters that moved to Republicans and really helped Republicans in Virginia. In the era of Donald Trump, I'm not sure they're swinging much at all right now. I'm not sure that they're moving from, say, Hillary Clinton back to a Republican for governor. And
right.
They're basically the thing about Donald Trump in Virginia anyway right now is that Trump has made nonpartisan voters that used to swing pretty consistently voting against Trump and his party if they vote. And so the real challenge for Democrats is convince them to vote because they're probably going to vote against Republicans. The real challenge for Republicans is to keep some distance from Donald Trump and hope that they don't vote.
To keep your base showing up.
And yeah. Ultimately, that's what I was going to get to. I think ultimately elections right now are base elections.
Right.
It's a matter of getting your base really excited to turn out to vote because if you're a Republican candidate, you're probably not going to convince many of those suburban voters to swing your way.
Right.
So you need your base to show up really big. If you're a Democrat, you want your base to show up really big, and you'd like to get those suburban voters to turn out because they're probably going to vote for your candidate.
Well, maybe we should reterm this so we can get on the same page here. Maybe they don't split ticket, but do the suburban voters, in your estimation, swing from anti-Obama to anti-Trump as a hedge on what's going on in the federal election, or are they just more energized to show up in those elections when you're voting against something?
Yeah, I think they probably did wing. They probably were voting against Obama, and then they swung and they're voting against Trump. I don't know that they voted against Obama at the same level of energy as they're voting against Trump. And I say that because, remember Obama carried Virginia twice. Democrats have carried Virginia statewide since 2009. So I think there was a little bit less swing back, um, swing against Obama and Democrats. There was a little bit less swing back the other direction with Trump. And that I think explains why Democrats statewide anyway have been doing as well as they've been doing, is that suburban, exurban voter, sort of the exurban Loudoun, Prince William, the exurban Henrico County, the suburban Henrico County. Maybe Henrico isn't an exurb. The suburban Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, they have not swung as much back toward Republicans as they probably were during the Obama years, in part, I think, because of Donald Trump.
Right, and I think that portends for a very difficult fall for Republicans and a happy one for Tim Kaine and the Democrats. Let's dive a little deeper here. On the Republican side, no real breakout candidate. Even though it's some people are calling it a safe Democratic seat, you still have 5-6 people running for the Senate nomination in Virginia.
Yeah, I don't think, it doesn't matter who you are. Tim Kaine, George Allen, when he was in the U.S. Senate, I don't think you should ever consider your seat safe. As you know better than I know, several months in an election season could be a lifetime, and lots can happen. And so I would never, if I were advising Tim Kaine, never consider this as a safe seat, but it does look good for Mizusawa jumped into the race, the former Army general. So we didn't have him in this survey. We came out of the field the day before he announced he was running. But I think what we see in this is that among voters, the Republican candidates are largely unknown among Republican voters, or Republican voters don't want to acknowledge that they know, say, a Corey Stewart. So we get these favorable, unfavorable numbers that show that the Republican candidates are largely unknown right now. And in that context, Corey Stewart has a lead, but he only has 16% of the Republican vote. And so I think what's going on is that the Republican field is unknown to many Republicans right now, but those who do know Corey Stewart and E.W. Jackson and the others can't decide who they want to support if they want to support anybody. So there's a lot of sorting that needs to happen on the Republican side.
And do you think it's wide open then?
I think it's wide open, actually. This is going to sound really odd, maybe, given the data that we've just presented, but I think Nick Freitas has great opportunities, in part because, look, if you're a Republican voter and you vote in Republican primaries, you're that kind of a Republican voter. You know who Corey Stewart is. You know whether you like him or you don't like him. If you're a Republican primary voter, you know who E.W. Jackson is. You know whether you like him or don't like him. And I would venture to guess that given that both of those guys have run before and lost, I bet that there are a lot of Republican primary voters who are waiting for somebody else to come in and say, look, I'll carry the banner of the party. Those two guys have tried it before. They didn't have good results, and we weren't happy with what they did. So I think there's an opportunity for a breakout candidate who isn't known by a lot of the primary voters on the Republican side. And so I do think there is opportunity for Nick Freitas. I do think there's opportunity for Burt Mizusawa. It's just a matter of whether they've got the time and the resources to actually make their name known among Republican primary voters. I
think you're right, because here's one of the things when I started looking at your poll numbers and started considering, who is likely to win the Republican nomination, and undecided comes in at 66, this close to the primary. It tells you they're either not engaged or not enthused. Either one is not good for those who have been in the contest, for several years, a la Corey Stewart. And I think they're in Virginia, both parties. I don't necessarily know if we do comebacks, do we? When someone
Not
loses,
really
they're done, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, excellent point. Not one I had actually been thinking about, but excellent point. Comeback stories are not common in Virginia in politics, and certainly not comeback stories from really bad losses. We've had people, like Mills Godwin run for governor again and be able to win election. Of course, that happened decades ago, but
Right.
we don't have people lose miserably and then come back. The last time we had it tried statewide was Jim Gilmore, and it didn't work. I think,
but I'm wondering if
good point.
even in the nomination phase, though, when you don't win a nomination, do you move up the ladder as the next guy? I mean, like sometimes, like Jerry Kilgore, that's how he became gubernatorial candidate in '05, because he finished second in '97 for attorney general, because then he was the attorney general candidate in '01, and he moved sort of up. But you have to keep momentum going up.
Right.
And I don't see that in this field. So the untested ones, Freitas and Mrs. could be that, new and shiny that gives us a chance, even though it's not likely that we're going to beat Tim Kaine. Whose banner do you want flying on your flag, or whose flag do you want flying for you and your team going into November? What's your best shot to say who you are?
Yep. Look, I always say compare, in thinking about this, compare Ed Gillespie against Mark Warner, and then Ed Gillespie's opportunity to run for governor. The reason Ed Gillespie had the opportunity to run for governor is because he did so well in a close loss to Mark Warner that he increased his value as a candidate in his loss to Mark Warner. You can't say that about Corey Stewart. You can't say that about E.W. Jackson. And so that's part of the reason that I think there's an opening here. If one of these other two candidates has the time and the resources to be able to introduce themselves to Republican primary voters and to make their case that they're different, that they've got to make an optimistic case, I think, to Republican voters, that they can carry the banner of the Republican Party, they can carry it proudly, and they can carry it in a way that the voters will be proud of them, even if it's a real uphill climb and the odds are against them beating Tim Kaine.
But it gives you a better shot, and at least I think that's what the Republicans are looking forward to. I think they know that Corey Stewart's probably not going to beat Tim Kaine. I think that's I would venture to say that a lot of Republican voters are going, well, okay, but it's just not going to be there. So what's the best result for our team, because we've got congressional candidates? But who knows? They might not think that deeply on these issues and think that far ahead. They might be just stirred up by a passion of one issue or not. And we're certainly seeing changes in the political landscape all across America. The populist trend in Europe has spread the United States, has been reflected back. Look at Italy over the last couple of weeks, even more so in Poland and in Germany. It's still coming on. So there's an angst in the electorate around the Western democracies. Final thoughts on where we are right now, Quentin, kid?
Where we are right now is, I think voters, in some ways, I think voters are tired of elections. We have them every year in Virginia. Think about this in the context of, if you're a Democratic voter or a Republican voter, just the normal everyday citizen out there. You live in suburban Henrico County, or you live in suburban Loudoun or suburban Virginia Beach, and you're a Democratic or Republican voter. You're probably slightly more engaged and excited if you're a Democrat than if you're a Republican in Virginia right now. This is the challenge I think Republicans have, is that they've got to turn to a Republican voter who might be a little bit down right now and more interested in watching The Bachelor than paying attention to politics, and say, look, we need you to pay attention because we've got a primary coming up and we've got a U.S. Senate race coming up, and we need to fight these fights no matter what. That's a real challenge that I think Republicans have. On the Democratic side, that challenge is just less the case because they're feeling optimistic in Virginia right now. Of course, 2 or 3 years from now, the tables will be completely turned or could be completely turned. But that's the challenge Republicans have right now. I think the General Assembly session kind of sucked the energy out of the room in terms of preparing for this Republican primary. But of course, that happens every 2 years anyway. And so none of this is non-normal. This is just what the two parties are having to deal with right now. Democrats are lucky they don't have to deal with a primary. Republicans have to deal with a primary. I would say one more point here. You'll note that there are no what we might call mainstream Republicans, Rockefeller Republicans, country club Republicans, Republicans like you were in this race. And I think
we don't do labels here. We don't do
okay,
labels.
Label-free zone. Sorry, but I think.
Have you seen my voting record?
I think if Corey Stewart weren't in this race, we would see at least one or more Republicans like that. But I think Corey Stewart ran such a scorched earth primary against Ed Gillespie that a lot of Republicans like Gillespie, who might be more business oriented, more thoughtful of the role of government on business and on people.
That label I will embrace.
I think a lot of Republicans like that simply said, I'm not going to get into a race and have to throw mud and have mud thrown at me like that. And I think that is to the detriment of the Republican Party because right now the Republicans are fielding a field that is only reflective of one side of their party. And not reflective of the broad landscape of the Republican Party. Now, we may see with Misuzawa, we may see something different there. But I don't know that, but we may see something different. But I think that's a real challenge for Republicans in Virginia is somehow the moderate, middle sort of Chamber of Commerce, Rockefeller wing of the Republican Party has to find a way to express itself more in the face of what is a populist wing of the party that is filling its oats right now, but not winning in statewide races, and that's the real challenge.
Is that a challenge also for Democrats?
Well, it could be, but it hasn't been. In part, Democrats have been.
I see rifts and potential divides in that party, especially coming into the presidential nomination phase when they know darn well if Bernie Sanders had won, he'd be president.
Sure.
I don't doubt that for a second. Bernie Sanders would have beaten Donald Trump.
You see this division in the Democratic Party in Virginia in the Tom Perriello, Ralph Northam wings of the party, but the difference is Perriello immediately turned around and endorsed Northam and campaigned for Northam, and you don't see that same thing happen on the Republican side. You didn't see Corey Stewart turn around and endorse Gillespie and campaign for him. And so while both parties have their rifts, and sometimes the rift on the Democratic side gets unbearable, right now it's more difficult on the Republican side than it is on the Democratic side. Again, you and I both know that'll change. There will be a time in the future where Republicans will be, all supportive of each other, and Democrats won't be able to stand in the same room together. But right now, that's the challenge for Republicans, and it's reflected in the candidates that they're fielding in this primary. These candidates don't reflect the broad landscape of the Republican Party. They reflect one side of that party, and not the other side.
Well, thank you, Quentin. We'll join you again when the next poll comes out. I would like to go down the road of is there a possible choice to ending this binary solution, this binary situation that we have here? Is there a third option going down the road? Because we see more, third party, fourth party, fifth party cropping up all over Europe. It's more of their parliamentary systems, but the binary system here in America might be able to withstand a test in that regard, and hopefully get them back to square.
Yeah, what's frustrating about the two-party system in this country is that we have a political system that never envisioned parties.
Right. We only have two.
Yeah, the political system never envisioned political parties. It envisioned individuals. It envisioned factions. It envisioned coalitions. But it envisioned those things constantly evolving and changing. And what's happened is we've had these two political parties emerge, and capture certain elements of those coalitions so that they can't evolve and come together over issues and then separate and come together in a different way over other issues. I mean, for example, if the two political parties didn't have such a lock on the political system, you could imagine the business friendly wing of the Democratic Party coming together with the Rockefeller wing of the Republican Party on issues of regulation and tax reform and things like that. And then they would divide on other issues, and there would be other coalitions. But the two parties have a lock on some of that stuff in a way that makes it really difficult for third parties to then emerge. And so I'm pessimistic that we're going to have a third party emerge in the near future. But anything can happen. I'm just pessimistic. I don't see the system institutionally making room for a third party, and I don't see a third party movement strong enough to push its way in right now.
Well, let's explore that. As a former history teacher, a government teacher, and a politician, it fascinates me, especially in the business world, because there's more than Coke and Pepsi out there on the store shelves, and we're always blue and red in politics.
I happen to like R.C. Cole.
You are old school, baby, old school. Thank you, Quentin.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Have
right.
a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.